And great. And we can go ahead and get started. So welcome
Awesome.
to the State of Innovation Challenge Industry Engagement. We're super excited to have you here, to be here with Treh Manhertz from Zillow. I'm Julia Reed. I'm the program manager for State of Innovation, and I'm really excited to lead this conversation about housing and economics and tech and all the work you do. So welcome, Treh.
Thanks for having me.
So why don't can you talk a little bit to folks that are watching about just what it is that you do at Zillow?
Yeah, so I am an economist at Zillow. I work on our external economic research team. Uh, my broader economic research team has a lot of different initiatives. Some are focused more inward on the company. My role is much more outward facing. I do research on the economy, on the housing market in particular, and tell those stories as I find them and as I read and assimilate this information, commentate on the housing market at large for audiences, newspapers, or in a lot of cases, local governments. Especially now, there's a lot of interest as they try to navigate navigate the changes in the market after COVID.
Yeah, that's awesome because I think a lot of people maybe know Zillow as the housing, like the software search tool you can use to look up and see houses for sale and book open houses. But it sounds like you guys also have like a policy arm that you're a part of.
Yeah, we definitely do a lot of work in policy spaces, just so consumers understand how to interact with housing in the market at the broad U.S. level, but also in their own particular home areas.
That's awesome. And you mentioned that like part of what you've been studying are trends that are coming out of COVID. Can you talk a little bit about what are some of the trends that you're seeing?
Yeah, there are a lot of pieces to this, and it's different for those who are looking to buy and sell homes versus renters. Um, One of the big things right at the beginning was a huge wave of uh, Gen Z adults, so 18 to 25-year-olds, moving home with their parents.
Hmm.
We saw 2.7 million young adults move home, or when with a parent or grandparent. And what that uh, did was, if we had to quantify like the effect on the rental market there, that's $726 million a month
Wow.
that suddenly just like that. I mean, if they broke lease, that would be a different thing. And but yeah, that was the level of potential risk in the rental market. And so yeah, you look at that sort of thing that can happen instantaneously, but then you look at buying, and that's a much longer term thing. You're making decisions based on where you're working, where you want to raise kids, where uh, all these different things that have like this much longer timeline.
Yeah.
Um, and there was a lot of talk at the beginning uh, of the pandemic, and even like Zillow speculated, are urban areas just going to get totally hollowed out? Are the suburbs going to see this huge boom as people don't want to be near other people and need more
Hmm.
space and make those changes? And uh, we monitored that over the course of the pandemic, and found that there was a housing boom, but that it wasn't super asymmetrical, and that it was specific to certain places, that it really matters how people are making these choices, and that it really comes down to the same things as it always has on housing affordability. Sort of places like San Francisco and New York are starting to lose some of that city fervor in their housing markets. But that's not the story everywhere, and it largely has to do with, can people buy homes there,
Yeah.
and do they have a better option?
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. I mean, it's interesting. I think at the beginning of the pandemic, you saw a lot of stories where people were like, oh, like people can work from anywhere now, so they'll we'll all buy cabins on mountainsides with great views and great Wi-Fi, and I don't, and it sounds like that hasn't. I mean, people are moving, but maybe a little bit less of this kind of massive exodus than you might think. And of course, there are people for whom their jobs can't be done remotely, and so moving is not like that kind of remote work lifestyle isn't really an option for everybody.
Yeah, that's right. When we looked at, how many, um, no, actually, a fair chunk of jobs in the U.S. can be done remotely, but it's definitely, it's different by industry, and
Right.
who has the jobs that can be done remotely. They may not feel that same pressure to go move somewhere. Um, it definitely depends. Uh, but looking at it, it was about two, uh, almost 2 million uh, people who couldn't have afforded to buy a home before in their current metro area, that now could if allowed to telework.
Hmm.
Uh, and that's 2 million is a lot, but among the whole population of renters, it's still a pretty limited number.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that renter trend that you mentioned for a little bit. So you see
Yeah.
people moving in with their parents. Do you also see people kind of moving in with each other, like trying to just find roommates or consolidate? I feel like I live in Seattle, and I feel like everywhere, every apartment building now is advertising vacancies and offering special benefits. Is that largely kind of that, is that part of that pandemic trend you see of people consolidating or moving in to sort of save money?
Yeah, there are a couple different um, ways that's moving. One, yeah, is the needing to save money and using whatever resources you can to uh, just to stay living in a house through whatever turbulence you're going through in your life. Um, the other side of it is if you were already living in a space where uh, had 5 roommates all with different lives, that suddenly became uh, intractable in itself, and
Yeah,
you had to uh, kind of redesign your life to be able to be safe. Uh, and so, in that way, roommates became a uh, less desirable option, and those who could uh, definitely would see that need uh, to find their own space or a smaller space, or one that they could control easier. The thing with renting, again, is that we will see those larger swings quicker because it's short timelines.
right.
Um, someone uh, could theoretically, leave the city if like the inner city is expensive. They could leave the city and just have a plan to come back the next year when things uh, calm down.
Yeah, like a renter could break a lease or just be at the end of their the end of their lease and pick up and go tomorrow, whereas selling a house is like a little bit more of a process, and it
A
takes a
process
lot of time.
and expensive
Yeah,
between like agent fees and fixing it up and marketing it. It's like 8% of a
right.
home's actual value, which is huge.
Yeah, that's huge. And especially if it's already in a pandemic, you're trying to hold on to everything that you can. That can seem a little daunting, I think, for people. Are you guys seeing it when you kind of do this economic research at Zillow? Do you see differences in like the kinds of houses people are buying, or the types of properties, or is it more just kind of like you can see like if people are buying houses versus condos? But are there any noticeable trends in sort of what is it kind of in demand now that we are sort of in this pandemic and kind of moving hopefully towards this post-pandemic space?
Yeah, so the first thing we really looked into was, is there a difference by like the cost of the homes?
Mm,
Um, and we did see that higher priced homes vanished from the market quicker in the spring and came back in strength much more in the fall. And that you can definitely attribute to, you know, if you associate those more high-priced homes with more wealth, these people have more resources to just make that choice to just shut off. Whereas the uh, at a like an entry level home, like say like a either a younger person less familiar with the market or someone who just has less financial resources generally to be able to make that determination. Like if they have to move, they have to move, and they have to do it on a timeline, and that could make the difference on what that move is going to look like, where they can move to the next place. So um, that was the first piece. But following up on that, in the urban suburban research that we did, we were looking at uh, condos versus uh, houses, and at different bedroom counts and square footages. And what we found was really there wasn't a whole lot of split there, which I
Mm,
thought was really interesting. That you hear a lot of these stories about like needing the extra bedroom as an office, or other reasons for just needing more home space. Um, that that didn't bear out just in the that first look at whether there was a divergence, and I think that's partially because any changes are going to be really family based and uh, depend on, again, those long term needs.
yeah,
Um, if uh, you do need that extra bedroom as an office, then how long are you expecting to need to do that, when it's safe to have shared workspaces outside the home again, or if you prefer to go work in a coffee shop or whatever. Even if you do have that non-office uh, potential, you may still not expect to need to shell out the money to have
yeah.
that extra bedroom anyway.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I'm coming to you live from my extra bedroom office right now. But one of the things I've learned in the pandemic for sure is just how many things you can do in a one bedroom apartment
Yeah,
and how many uses you can put your space to. It's like it is that's interesting though that people aren't necessarily like meaningfully getting bigger places than they would otherwise, but maybe they're just finding more innovative ways to use the space that they have. A lot of doubling up happening. A lot of kitchen offices. That's what I had
kitchen
before this
offices. Yeah,
one.
I'm coming to you live from the one bedroom in a one bedroom apartment.
Yeah, exactly. Like learning all the things we can do with our space is definitely key. And do you guys look at trends in commercial real estate too? I know there's been a lot of changes in the city of Seattle and the downtown cores and some of our other cities around how those spaces are used. Do you track kind of commercial space trends as well as residential?
No, no. Zillow is definitely 100% focused on the residential real estate market.
That makes sense.
Um, the commercial market has definitely, it's really interesting, but definitely a different set of needs, different laws, and different consumers.
Yeah,
We're looking at the
yeah.
individual families and like uh, you know, what they can do to get into a home.
And probably driven by different market forces too, and
Absolutely.
how that the like you said, a lot of the choices that shape how people what people buy for residential homes is, how many kids are they going to have kids, where are they going to work, what are their family needs, and school districts, all of those things kind of go into choices. And those are some choices that the pandemic, it feels like, hasn't really changed. Like people are still in school
Yeah.
districts, people still are thinking
Yeah.
about having families and
And that was really our argument at the beginning was, this is, um, a rough time, but the major drivers are still there. There's still, uh, you know, demographic tailwinds, like a lot of millennials just like hitting that first home buying age. That's still going to be there. They're still going to be having kids. That's all there. Um, the the underlying forces are just the same, with, I'd say, the exception of this telework move.
That's awesome. Well, I'd love to talk about you for a little bit, Trey, to take
Oh
a step
yeah.
away from the market. How did you come to work at Zillow? Were you always dreaming of being a housing economist, or how did you come to Zillow, and what did you do before you worked at Zillow?
It was a long process, a lot of steps, but I'd say that mostly it makes sense how I got here. High school, I wanted to be a psychiatrist, totally off base, but I had an AP economics class in in high school that I really enjoyed because of, like, it started from simple logical principles, and like
Mhm.
that was really appealing. The price of a substitute goes up, people want your product more, that's more demand. Like, okay, I can see how the curve moves. And so just building on that foundation was exciting. It was like, I could definitely see just like the simplicity at first, and then just like, okay, but where does it break? And like
Right,
start to understand the real complexities there. Still going into college, I didn't know what I was going to do. I still put um, psychology as my probable major, and uh, I just explored definitely for the first year. I was lucky enough to go to a school where I didn't have to do a lot of a lot of like general prerequisites. Um, so that was good, and I just found that I really loved my economics classes, and I really loved my computer science classes, and kind
hmm,
of the same thing there. Just like, yeah, the logical building blocks, or like the building blocks of logic rather,
that's
that
awesome.
were really fun for me. And so I really especially liked working with data in my economics classes. We did a lot looking at uh, like wage gap differences between men and women across races, and that was fun to be able to dig into. So I wanted to get my hands on data immediately leaving college. I worked for a couple years as a data analyst at the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation, uh, which is under the University of Washington. They've been doing a lot of these COVID estimations, but they also do
Right.
estimation of disease of all types, contagious, chronic, um, even injuries. Uh, and so that was, yeah, a lot of data work, um, and a lot of really interesting problems that they work on, which gave me the experience and the confidence to make that next step. And I came to Zillow as an economic data analyst. I was uh, really deep in the data, and just became so entrenched in it that kind of learned how to reapply it in a lot of different ways, and could gain larger insights. And last year I was promoted to economist, and I now do a lot more of that sort
Congratulations.
of. Thank you. I now do a lot more of that, more forward-facing narrative building work, and some longer-term research. And that's been
Yeah.
really good. So a lot of steps, but definitely all leading somewhere. And
Yeah,
happy
no,
that's ended.
I love that about our career, how sometimes when you're in the middle of it, it can just feel like you're like, oh, I'm just making this choice and making that choice. And then you look back and you're like, oh, actually, like there was a pattern here. Like this was all
Yeah.
kind of building. I mean, not that I'm sure when you were in AP economics in high school, Zillow didn't maybe even exist. So it wasn't
Oh
that you
man.
were
It would have been
that was
around that time.
necessarily the aim. But yeah, it was early days. But it sounds like it's I love that some of the themes you mentioned around loving to solve problems, being excited by kind of economics is such a fun discipline. Because like you said, there are all of these rules and models that really help make sense of the world. And then once you kind of master the classics, then you can kind of break the rules and see how it works in how those models bear out in real life. So I think that's a cool avenue. Do you have any advice for if the other young people who are like, I like data and I'm interested in kind of how the world works, how economics works? Do you have any like advice or suggestions for them, people that want to maybe be economists like you one day?
Yeah, I guess I would start by saying you don't have to wait. You don't have to, wait for the degree, wait for the classes for someone to, really walk you through it. Like it's, yeah, incredibly helpful. You learn a lot going through that, but you can start just by looking up on the web. Like I'd say the quickest way to start looking around and getting familiar is to go to data.census.gov, and they have tables. You can download data, you can look through, you can look at some of the differences, start wrapping your head around why numbers for certain groups might be the way they are. And then R is a coding language. It's free downloads. If you have a computer, you have all the tools to do what I do. Um, read, watch the news, watch a lot of sources, and see uh, you know what's happening where, why people might be making decisions they are, and uh, what resources they're using to inform them. And in a lot of cases, those are just accessible.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, there's a lot out there to use, and the census data website's a great suggestion because it is true. There's so much good data there, and we just completed another census every 10 years that we try to survey everyone who lives in the United States or try to count them anyway. So there will be new data coming into the
Yeah,
census site soon. I'm sure you're probably excited about getting your
I
hands
am.
on that.
Oh man, I am definitely tuned into their cycle. I wait for those data releases. But I have to also put in a plug for if housing market research is what you're interested in. Go to zillow.com/research/data,
There you
and
go.
all of the time series we look at and create, they're there, and you really can get a sense of if the market speeds up, do uh, sales go up, what's inventory doing, what's all the pieces are there.
Yeah, I love it. That's so great. Well, I want to definitely be sure we link to that on our website too, so that I'll make sure to update that so students have access as they're going through their projects. And kind of speaking of projects, so part of the challenge is one of the options cases that students can take on is this question about like our communities after COVID-19 and how can we build kind of more resilient better communities in the wake of this, and like how could we like think differently about maybe how we design our cities or our neighborhoods. And that could be within the case we offer students a chance to think about how could we make communities that are better protected from wildfires. For example, we had a great session with the Department of Natural Resources, and they talked about their fire adapted communities. Or they might think about how could we use um, spaces in our downtown core differently. There's a question about innovative housing models for people that are homeless. I think one of the things we've really learned through the pandemic is that even more so than what we knew before, how important housing is to health. And how like having a safe place to live, how that really impacts not just your personal health, but in a time of pandemic, really also impacts community health as well. And so that's been an interesting area, and there's lots of interesting innovative models. And I was just wondering if you had any thoughts for students if they are trying to think about, okay, I want to think about what a neighborhood should look like after COVID, with what we've learned from the pandemic, what people want, do you have any suggestions for what they should be thinking about, like based on your data and research, like what people value and what they're really seeking in neighborhoods, and not in general? It's a big question overall. Not in human life, just in
Yeah. Why
housing.
do we do what we do? Yeah. So, so I would say that one, like people live where they do for a lot of reasons, and that can come down to very personal choices. It can be family. Uh, it can be just enjoying the city or the landscape. It could be uh, being close to a job, or it could be uh, an affordability choice, and or you know maybe that's not the best way to put it. You could be limited by affordability, that you have very particular pockets that you need to be living in, and what, and those reasons don't go away post pandemic, but the way they're served definitely can. And so, one of the things is access to amenities, say healthcare, groceries, schools, um, public parks. A lot of where we uh, locate, say the retail core or
Mhm.
uh, groceries, can um, can adjust to fit the patterns that people take up in their lives.
Yeah,
So, if you're not driving downtown as regularly, you're not going to see that storefront. You're not going to see that advertisement. You're not going to go to that gas station. And
right.
uh, so a lot of those things will become probably more neighborhood centric. I
Mhm.
was thinking, just kind of specific to Seattle, but when the West Seattle Bridge was closed up, and at the same time as the pandemic setting in, it was a thought that suddenly West Seattle, which does have a lot of amenities of its own, it's gonna they're going to be able to hold on to a lot more of that demand that might have been flooding into downtown,
Right.
and would need to then serve that.
Mhm.
Um, that there could potentially be a boom of stores, of you know coffee shops, of urgent care centers, all in West Seattle.
Right.
Um, so kind of looking at you know where people need to go on a day-to-day basis, and why they're making uh, the choices they're making.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And especially, I think the West Seattle Bridge, and if you're not from Seattle, that's a major travel pathway in the city, one of the most used bridges to get in and out of downtown from a big residential and commercial area in West Seattle. And it had to close because of structural failure, structural challenges that were discovered, cracks in the bridge. So they had
Yeah,
to close it while they're trying to figure out if they can repair it or if it has to be replaced. It's a very expensive project. And it has really, I think, changed a lot of choices that people make. And I think it's interesting to think about how people get around a city, and then also sort of where they travel to. So whether they're coming to downtown or West Seattle, and then also how they travel. Like I think about prior to the pandemic, we did a lot of talking about transit oriented development and how to build housing and other amenities at transit stops or on transit stops or around transit within a 10-minute walk of transit. And I think not that that has gone away. I think hopefully as like things becomes safer to be around, transit will again become an important part. But a lot of people, the ridership on transit is way down now, and suddenly, people are thinking more about driving or walking or staying in their own neighborhoods, just so that they can limit how much they have to be around people. Um,
Yeah. And I could see with transit in particular, yeah, orienting your transit system around the downtown might be
right.
less of a focus versus connecting uh, now these different pockets, different neighborhoods. Um, I'll say Zillow's done some research on uh, or has put out surveys and has survey data on what commutes people will accept, and it's pretty uniform that people will stand on average for no more than a 30-minute commute.
Interesting.
And so, and their housing decisions are based on that. And so now, if that's gone away, like for those people, what is that next most important thing that you have to be near?
Mm,
Um, and how are you expecting to get there? Whether it's public transit or car or biking or
mhm.
uh, what have you. Um, but yeah, that there is definitely this limit and this of 30 minutes and this hierarchy then of where you need to go.
Right. That's so interesting. I never thought about it. So it's like first choice is like, I want to buy something that's within 30 minutes of my job. That's kind of like, and now that's sort of got, for some people that restraint has sort of gone away. And so now you're kind of able to see like, oh, is it, I want to be within 5 blocks of my kid's school, or I want to be within a 10-minute drive of a grocery store or a park, or something like that. And I guess for every person, that's probably different, like depending on their kind of personal circumstances and what their sort of needs are.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. So it's the hierarchy of needs in housing purchasing.
Yeah, that's
Kind of
right.
in its own way. Okay, well, in our last kind of few minutes, I'd love to subject you, if I can, to a little bit of a Trey Manhertz lightning round. Uh, yeah, get ready, stretch out. Okay, what is the best thing about your job at Zillow? Your favorite thing about it? It could be the
um,
swag, if that's the answer.
I would say just the lively conversation and back and forth with other people in the field. It's just exciting, and we challenge each other's ideas, and I think it makes us all better.
Have you ever made a mistake on the job?
Absolutely.
I
Oh man.
keep waiting for the person to be like, no, my record is spotless.
If that person exists. Oh man. No, and we mitigate what we can. And it's kind of the nature of coding and of being a commentator on certain things. Is sometimes you make an assumption and it's wrong. Sometimes your code breaks because you weren't expecting an input, or maybe you just didn't handle it well. And that yeah, especially on the coding side of it, like we try to mitigate that as much as we can with code checks, but you can only expect so much. Data is dirty. That's just how it goes, and um, you're never going to be able to describe uh, people completely with
Mhm.
models and aggregate numbers, and it's just not uh, the way it works. And so you end up making assumptions that you shouldn't make, and that's just a piece of it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, you can't be afraid to make a mistake, especially like you
Yeah.
said, data is never as clean as you want it to be. There's always, always holes. Well, here's another question that often comes in. I think people, when they think about working in tech or maybe even working in with economic data, they think of like men, white men, like pocket protectors, that kind of thing. Are there a lot of women that work in your field, and what does that look like?
I'd say yes, and increasingly at higher levels.
Yeah.
All three. So uh, I was actually in a position when was it when I started, or was it just somewhere along the way, where uh, my immediate boss was a woman, her boss was a woman, and our chief economist, her boss was a woman. So I think that's not super common, but yeah, I will say, especially, at, well, Zillow is particularly conscious about it, but yeah, as people are becoming more conscious of these structures and how like things change from the top down, and you need to be very intentional about it. These things are changing. I think my team is actually fairly diverse, racially and in gender, and even in our academic backgrounds, people don't definitely don't come from a lot of the same backgrounds or schools. There is a concentration in economics majors and
Mhm.
people who've worked for consulting firms, but I mean, because that's the nature of getting your hands on the data
Yeah,
right now. But that's definitely not across the board.
yeah,
In a lot of ways, there. Yeah.
that's awesome. Okay, last lightning round question. Since you work at Zillow, if you could live anywhere in the world, where would you choose to live, Trey?
Oh, can I pick a time too?
He was, he was like, I was not prepared for this question.
I was not. Um, wow. Uh, so I do like the sun. I do like the warmth. Um, I actually, right now I would say I would choose. I've never been there. I don't know why, 100%, but I think I would choose North Carolina.
North Carolina, good
I was
choice.
looking it up the other day, and just like the weather patterns, and I was just like, it's temperate, but it's like also, they get a lot more sun than here.
Yeah, and a lot of
That could
housing
be for me.
affordability in North Carolina.
And housing affordability. That's right.
Yeah, no, it's
But
beautiful
yeah,
there. I used to spend a lot of time there before. I think it's an excellent choice. Well, if you're
um,
looking for Trey and his Wi-Fi cabin on the hill for remote working, I guess we'll try North Carolina next. Trey, thank you so much for your time. This was so great. Really appreciate it. Everyone, if you want to join us for our last State of Innovation industry engagement with Washington Green Schools, it's going to be on Tuesday, February 23rd. We're very excited to have them talk about their work making green communities. Trey, thank you so much. This was so great. If you have more questions for Trey, you can shoot us an email, stateofinnovationwa@gmail.com, and we'll be happy to pass those along. Please keep working on your projects, and we can't wait to hear from you soon. Thanks so much, Trey.
thank you.